Hello and welcome to the Cardiac Cats YouTube channel. I'm your host Jacob Shorba, and today we'll be doing our mock draft 9.0 for the Jacksonville Jaguars. So, to start this off, I actually had one recorded last week. I didn't end up putting it out because I felt like there could have been some better things talked about. Just could have done a better job in general, and kind of need to take a break for a minute here, is because we've talked a lot about the draft the past couple months, and so I want to kind of refresh before we get to it, because now we've got pretty much just 2 weeks until we're going to be out there, so it's going to be a good time. I'm excited for it. I hope to be out there all 3 days, record some stuff, and I hope it's a great draft for the team, because this will really tell us a lot about what the season's going to look like, because they could bring in some great players. There's a lot of guys that I think have made great arguments to be selected in the first round, and you can find some impact players as well after that point, whether you're standing put or making a trade up the board. So definitely excited for it, but we're going to go ahead and we're going to jump into some details before we go into this mock draft. The Jaguars, since the last time that we've talked on here, have made some different moves, made a few offensive signings. I believe, hit on them in our live stream a little bit, but they got Josh Wells, swing tackle for the team as of now, and they also picked up another offensive lineman for the interior, but mainly signings that aren't really impacting the cap a whole lot. If you look at Josh Wells' cap hit on here, I mean, you gotta scroll down pretty far. I guess it's not even, yeah, here it is. So he's getting a cap hit of like $1 million. So we're talking about a lot of veteran minimum deals or really close to that. I think everything he's being paid, it was supposed to be like 1.3 million, but you kind of see what's going on here. They're really just trying to add some depth to the team, not break the bank. However, they also did restructure Rayshon Jenkins. So you see, if we go out to like 2025 now, 2026, you're going to see some cap hits from him. So you see about $4 million this year. And then out past that, cap numbers aren't really there, but they really just hit that one season. So you see they push the money down the road. And we ask, like, why is the team doing that? Well, I think there's two different reasons why they could be. I think one of them is that they're going to bring in some signings from free agency of the remaining players, which you have some good people still available. I think Leonard Floyd could be one of those guys. You could also go a one-year flyer with guys we've talked about like Justin Houston, maybe even Melvin Ingram. You could find players like that still on the market, and they're going to be cheap around this point, and I don't think they're going anywhere right now. I think it's still going to be a little bit. So this could happen after the draft. So you see money available for that. Also throw in DeJuan Smoot because he's a player I do still expect to be back with the team. And then outside of that, I think there is the possibility that they want to go trade for someone. And excuse me for just a moment. I have just woken up a little bit ago, and it's spring, so my voice is awful. So apologize for that. But thus is the nature of this time of year. So I think there's different things they can do there. If we're talking about trade, you'll see players hit the trade market quite a bit over the offseason. We almost saw Greg Newsome hit the trade market, which would have been fantastic. I think that would have been a really smart decision if he was there, because you're not trading a ton and you're getting a good slot corner. So that would have been pretty cool, but that was all a hoax, and sometimes it just is. Sometimes rumors don't have any credibility to them. But there's also been talk about Zadarius Smith for the team, and that would actually make a lot of sense for why they're clearing up cap, because ultimately out of this cap space there's only like just over 3 million going towards signing draft prospects, because you're replacing players on here. So it's the effective cap change from that, and they would have almost $12 million to work with, so they could go make a move like that, which is great. So just things to consider here. With that said, we're going to talk a little bit about some rumors regarding the draft. Things I've heard. I heard a couple days ago. For one, this was watching a mock draft on that franchise guy's channel. Fun channel to watch. Definitely recommend him. Most people know about him, but Marcus Whitman talks about a lot of good stuff on there. He's pretty well educated on the entire draft process, and he had Bengal on, who's younger guy, but still knows a lot of scouts and a lot of people in the NFL. It has a lot of knowledge on the things going on. And what he said when they were talking about the Jaguars was that he heard a nugget from the league, from people involved, that Trent Baalke is extremely high on Brian Branch. And I think that what that tells us is that it is more likely than not that if he's sitting there at 24 for the team, I think the Jaguars are selecting him. And it makes sense. Makes complete sense. I would not be mad at that pick at all. There's been a lot of points this offseason where that might have been the pick I preferred even. Because I think you can make an argument that if you're picking Brian Branch, say slot corner is the biggest need on this team. Say it is for a moment. Because I think there's a very strong argument for that. If that's the biggest need on this team, and Brian Branch is the best slot corner by a country mile right now, could you potentially even have a better selection for this season out of everyone in the draft? I think there's an argument there. So especially picking at 24, if you're getting Brian Branch to follow your team because teams don't value the position, which I think they should, because slot corner is on the field a lot, I think that's a home run for the team. So I would love that selection. Other players we hear about, I'll throw in one that we don't as much that I think makes sense. I've talked about him before, but Myles Murphy, I believe, visited with the team. If he falls, he would be a very good pick for this team. He would make a ton of sense. I believe he was also working out Trayvon Walker the other day, so and connect dots if you want. Might not be much of anything, but makes sense to get a young, athletic edge rusher with tons of upside and a bit of a more proven repertoire than some of the other guys in here too. Well, 2022 wasn't as good as previous year. I still have him as like a top 10 prospect in this draft. I think he's right there. And then they also have obviously talked about Cyrus Torrence a lot. He seems like a very potential selection. Could even see him as the right tackle at some point. Say they move on from Cam Robinson. He has a build that can play out there, and he could be your swing tackle to start. So Torrance makes a ton of sense. He could also take over for Brandon Scherf after this year if you want to save cap space there. There's things you can do with him. And so that would be a smart selection. Deonte Banks, another corner to throw into the mix. You also throw in Cam Smith. Banks is shot up boards. He's right now around the teens for a lot of people. He's probably going to be gone before the selection. But if he's there at 24, that could be a really valuable selection for the team. Get a talented corner. And just think about all the cool shirts you could design with, lock down the bank and Deonte Banks on this team. I mean, it's just too tempting. And the other guy I'll throw in here, along with him and Cam Smith, is Dalton Kincaid. Because while he hasn't been talked about a ton, there are a lot of people who feel like he may be the best fit for the Jaguars in this draft. From the type of player he is, what the team values, even the contract situation with Evan Ingram. All those things factor into that. And Kincaid, as far as a player, he has some really good comps going into the NFL. And right now, I think he is very fairly the number one tight end in this class. And your only concerns are really he's had some injuries, which could go away. Hasn't really killed his career at all, but he's had him come up. And outside of that, as a blocker, he's not the best. But the only really good blocker in this class at tight ends, well, probably two. You're talking about Darnell Washington and Sam Laporta, as far as the top guys. So just things to consider. He's a willing blocker still, but as a receiver, you don't get better than what he does. You just watch his film, watch his highlights. You see how capable of a receiver he can be, the catches he comes down with. He would be a monster on this team, and he's the perfect kind of Doug Peterson tight end. So All guys, I think, are very much in the mix, and I would expect one of those 6 to be selected if the Jaguars don't trade out of this pick. But the Jaguars, really, in the first round at this point, they can choose the best player they want, because the only position that has extreme fall off to where you probably can't get someone even close to that caliber after without like a big trade up, it's probably tight end. Because I don't think there's an Eric Kincaid in this class. I think you're seeing all these other guys go off the board, and maybe Luke Musgrave's sitting there. But I'll be honest, I'm not a Luke Musgrave fan. I felt like when I watched him that you just saw him get bulldozed so often. Like, I'm not sure that guy could break a tackle for his life. I mean, just watching him. And I could have bad film on him. It could just be what I saw. But that's what I got from the film, and I'm not really that thrilled with it. Plus, he's got bigger injury concerns than a lot of these other guys. So, that's probably the only position that I feel like you cannot find a really high-quality player after the first round at. And so, 24, I think, is definitely up for sale. You know, unless we have a really great prospect fall, like a Miles Murphy. A Brian Branch could prevent the team from trading out of the pick. But I could see teams getting desperate to move up. I think as far as teams we could talk about, you've got, heck, I mean, you could even throw in the Cowboys if you want, just for a small trade. If they want to hop the Giants for someone. Not sure that happens, but you could throw them in the mix. I think the first of these teams that's pretty realistic could be the Saints. Maybe you throw in the Bengals if they want to secure a tackle or a tight end. But the Saints have a history of trading up. They've done this consistently. They did it for Chris Olave. They make these kinds of moves, and they could be a team you get a lot of capital from. And what if they want to get, say, Hendon Hooker in the first round? Maybe they value him really high, and they want to move up. Now, if they did that, probably makes more sense to trade with the Ravens, because the Vikings might be in that market, but I think the Saints are on the board. Talk about the Eagles. I think there's certain players they do it for. I think the obvious one is Nolan Smith. As far as other prospects, if Bijan Robinson falls that far, I would make that trade. I would not mind trading more capital to get that kind of running back, because he's that kind of prospect. He's arguably the best prospect in the class, you know, outside of positional ranking. Could see it even with Miles Murphy if he falls. And what about Cyrus Torrance? Throw him out there. Kalijah Cansey. Cansey's a guy they could like. Torrance could fill in for Isaac Sumalo. So, different things that they could trade up for. I think the Chiefs could also look at a move, because for them, you need to get a good tackle, and you need to get a good receiver in this class. And maybe one of those is sitting on the board that they don't think is going to be there. And the other one that I would say out of the closer options, Pittsburgh Steelers at 32. First pick of the second round, because of the Miami Dolphins pick being forfeited. For the Steelers, I think for them there's kind of like 3 obvious options right now. There's going cornerback, getting Joey Porter, right? Joey Porter Jr., that is. They could go receiver, get Jordan Addison, the guy who is mocked to them quite frequently, and you pair up Kenny Pickett with his former receiver at Pitt before this last year. You could also see them go tackle, because their tackle room is really bad, and they go after a Broderick Jones or a Peter Skoronski, whoever's sitting there at that point, maybe even Anton Harrison. So all things I think the Steelers could go after, and if they are sitting here with the Chase Claypool pick, they've got one of these players, and Jordan Addison's on the board at 24, or you got a Broderick Jones that fell down somehow. If you're Pittsburgh, you're giving up a lot of capital to move up. I do believe that. So that'd probably be one of the last of the really close options. Some dark horse ones. I think Seattle could want to make a move. Say there's a good receiver on the board that fits them. Or they want to make a move up for Torrance after going somewhere else at 20. Maybe even Brian Bresee. You know, that's another player they've been linked to. Carolina Panthers, once they select Bryce Young, which seems to be the case, they're going to want to give him a good receiver on that team because, let's be honest, Adam Thielen, Laviska Shenault, and DJ Chark is not enough. We saw it in 2021. And your only guy that was different on our receiving core was Marvin Jones instead of Adam Thielen. And I don't think there's a huge disparity between those players at those points in their careers. So I think they're very much in the market for trading up. So all teams will consider. But with all that talking, we're going to go ahead and jump into this. Apologize for how long that takes, but I think it's important stuff to bring up with the draft that we need to talk about. So with that said, we are going to go ahead and start this. We'll go pick by pick early on, kind of evaluate the board, see who's all available, consider a trade up even if we need to. I think there's players we could make that move for. Now that's crazy, but whatever. I've also got this re-ranked. So the way this is now is off the consensus board, off of the NFL mock draft database. So that should help kind of have these be a little more realistic, a little more in line with where players are going to go. See Miles Murphy's off the board. And we've still got Will Levis falling. Which I don't think he's going to fall that far. Yeah, Commanders pick him up there. At this point, Paris Johnson is still on the board. Joey Porter still on the board. Which is crazy. They should not be available here. And this is a pick where if the Steelers were willing to trade it, I would move up here and get Johnson if I could. I think he's that good of a prospect. You're just getting a home run guy. Also a great person to add to your community. However, the Steelers aren't trading this pick. And as we all knew they were going to do, they picked Paris Johnson. So won't really consider that. Joey Porter is a guy a lot of people are really high on. I'm not as high on him. A lot of people would probably consider trading up for him here. But at this point, not really anyone I would consider it for. So we'll kind of watch how the board falls. See Banks go off the board. Porter, still there. And he goes off the board to the Vikings. Probably just made a lot of people mad. But that's just my opinion on it. If you really like Joey Porter, you're moving up to 22 with the Ravens. That's an easy decision there. Now, looking at the board here, I think this is one of those situations where Pittsburgh is very much interested. The Eagles could be interested because you have Robinson and Cansey here. Maybe even the Bengals want to move up for Michael Mayer, but I don't think he's going off the board before them. You've got Brian Branch on the board still. And I could see the Chiefs wanting Zay Flowers. So it's a good place to trade down at this point. And I think that's better for the team to trade down. Especially you consider if you trade down the first round, you get a little more capital. It does allow you to move around in the second without giving up a ton of these extra picks. And you could land a guy like a BJ Ojulari that you feel like should be in the first round because Ojulari is that good. Just my opinion. And a lot of others too, I think. But Ojulari is the most advanced pass rusher in this class by miles. I think he's just ridiculously talented. The moves he has are crazy. And so I think you could consider making a move up for him if you get extra capital. So at this point, we're looking at the Eagles and we're looking at the Steelers. So we'll see kind of what picks they got here. Look at the two different trades. And I think with this board, you're probably getting a lot of capital in return. These teams are going to be desperate for these moves. So let's look at Pittsburgh first. For Pittsburgh, this is your opportunity to put that young wide receiver around your franchise quarterback like we've seen so many other teams do. Right? We've seen it with the Eagles putting A.J. Brown with them. We saw Jamar Chase go back to the Bengals, go play with Joe Burrow. This could be another example of it. The Jaguars just brought in Calvin Ridley to pair up. But we see some of these reunions. I think even Devontae Smith was one in Philadelphia. But they work out pretty well. You know, there's still chemistry there. And so you could see a trade that's pretty lopsided here to go make that kind of move. And so obviously, like, the value's pretty far off, right? And we'll throw in an air pick, say 419. They're giving up a lot here. But I think this trade is possible because of the receiver value, the fact that Addison should be off the board by this point, and the fact that there's not really this opportunity for the Steelers with someone else. And I want to argue this because I want people to understand that these kinds of moves can be made. Like, you will see teams give up a lot, and we've seen teams give up two second rounders to move up into the first. That has happened, and this is a really good selection in the first round. So Pittsburgh's trade, I think you see something like that. The Philadelphia Eagles, I don't think they're going to be as desperate to make a trade. But you're getting 2 selections earlier in the first round. You get the 5th-year option as well. Maybe you see the second go to you. The more realistic is the 3rd and then some. But they don't have a lot of capital this year, so you're talking about maybe a future 3rd or 4th coming to the team as well. So maybe we trade the 2nd, and in return, we're giving up, say, 419. It's a little closer in trade value here. However, you compare it to what you get with Pittsburgh. Your second rounder is a lot higher. And then your 2 picks later in the first. And I think they are going to be more desperate. So that's who we're going to trade with here. And hopefully they actually pick up the right guy, because sometimes they just do stupid stuff. But we know in reality, like, that's the kind of trade they're going to make. It's the kind of guy they're going to go after. So we'll give up 419 here. We'll give up the higher of the 4th rounders. Not that there's a huge disparity between them. And then we don't really need anything else. So do that trade. And they go Keon White. Oh, man. That's pretty dumb. Unfortunately, you can't force those picks with them. But the reality is here, if they're trading up to this point, we know Jordan Addison's going off the board. That's the obvious pick for them. A guy they're linked to right now, a guy they really want. So, yeah, kind of a bizarre choice there. Of course it reaches. But we'll move to our pick, and we'll evaluate who's here. So we got Torrance off the board. Cam Smith's gone. And now we're to the 2nd round of the draft. Derek Hall's off pretty quick here too. There's a lot of options. And I think there's two really obvious options here. Be very tempting for the team. I like Jordan Addison, right? But we're not going to pick him because, for one, he should not have been here. That should have been the Steelers' pick. And unfortunately, we can't force that. But I'm not even going to consider him being here because that should not even be the case. Michael Myers, a very talented tight end. Brian Branch could be your home run pick for the Jaguars. A lot of people like Darnell Wright even. Not huge on him, but you could get him in the 2nd round. This would be a place I'd be all right with it. Zay Flowers would be a really cool receiver to bring in to the team, but I don't think they're going to do that. And Dalton Kincaid, fantastic tight end. Great person to bring into this team. So at this point, there's really 2 players you love on this board. And we're going to go with Brian Branch here because he fills a bigger need the first year. He is a very special player. And especially with Michael Mayer still on the board here, all the tight ends still here, there's the opportunity for us to trade back up. It's possible. Not necessarily that it'll happen. But we also have this 18th pick now. So we can move this up. We can give up capital to make that kind of move for the team. So Brian Branch is going to be our pick there. Now, we're going to let it a little bit go by because there are other options we could love in the 2nd round. You've also got guys like, heck, even Anton Harrison if you want. You've got Adetomiwa Adebari. you've even got BJ Ojulari sitting down here. And so we'll move pick by pick. There goes one of them. I think this is where we consider it. While the Saints are very aggressive to trade up a lot, I think that they're a team that, with how much they've given up, does need to recoup some capital. And so this is the place that does make sense for us to make that kind of move. Maybe we're giving up a third and looking to get back a fourth in return, so we downgrade our third round selection. And then we'll also throw in a sixth rounder. So we're giving up a little extra capital, which is fine. We got a ton in the trade with the Steelers. And so you're making this move because you still have your second, and you'll have 2 fourth-round selections after this. So you've got 5 really good picks still. And you're getting a guy who's going to fit on this team for a long time. You're getting him at a great point in the draft. So with Brian Branch off the board to us, we've hit one need really big, and we're also able to land Dalton Kincaid. And so what I think this shows, as flawed as some of this has turned out because of crap like this here, which shouldn't happen, I think you see the point that teams could be really desperate for this spot. There are teams that make sense to move up here, and they could also want to move up with a different team. There's other teams that would definitely be willing to trade back, that's for sure. But Jacksonville, I think this year is the year that they trade back in the NFL draft. I think it makes too much sense, and I think you'll consolidate picks after that, because I don't think they're coming home with 10 or 11 prospects. But you kind of see that here even. We're down to 8 picks, but these 8 picks are more valuable than the 9 we had before, because we're trading with desperate teams. And so with doing that, you got 2 players that you felt like could have gone in the first round. Someone's going to fall. It's going to happen. Now you've got your tight end of the future. You could still keep Evan Ingram around. That's completely fine. And you got your slot corner. So 2 really high-end upgrades, one on each side of the ball. So now we're going to keep moving pick by pick, because there's going to be another opportunity to make a move here. And I think this is where I'm going to make the move, because I don't want to risk this. We've hit cornerback really well, or safety you could argue, right? But this is your slot corner for this year. We got a great player there. We got a great player at tight end, another place I think the team could look to address this offseason. There is another player that I think would be fantastic at this point that we mentioned before, and that's BJ Ojulari. Now, we're going to look at what the capital is to make another move here. And this is a lot of moves. We're doing a lot here. But this is something I would 100% consider. You're moving up 8 picks at this point of the draft. And just why I think that this alone would be enough, and why this is probably the trade we'll do. In the first round, the Jaguars traded up 6 selections, right? From 33 to 27. They gave up the first pick of the 4th round for this. This is 8 selections, but it's the end of the second round, or the middle of the second round. So these picks are worth a lot less. So giving up roughly the same amount, just 12 selections later, that's more than enough to make this kind of trade. I think this is one the Lions would accept. They can get a nice player in the 4th round. And doing that now allows us to go after another great player on this team. So we're going to go with BJ Ojulari. There's other options you could have gone with. Steve Avila even could have been someone. Isaiah Foskey maybe. Antonio Johnson. If we didn't have Brian Branch, that would make a ton of sense. And you got some good corners here. Could have stayed put for him. But we're going to get a great pass rusher. We're going to throw him in the mix. Because why not? I mean, why not add to that room and get a young guy? I think while BJ Ojulari doesn't have the ideal size for the position or anything that completely blows you out of the water, how advanced he is as a pass rusher is what's going to sell you on a player like that. So we'll go ahead and move forward to our next pick. And essentially what we've done here, we've moved around our first 3 selections quite a bit. And we ended up moving back, probably 8 spots in the first round. So we moved to the top of the second. You also consider if you want to trade back, the Steelers make a ton of sense too, because if you control the first pick of the second round, you could get a team very desperate to land a prospect and make another trade with you. And I would take that. If you're getting a good offer, you have to consider it. Or you just get the best player who should have gone in the first round. We also upgraded our second rounder, and we moved a third rounder up into the second. Would we lose, though? It would be the middle of the fourth rounder and then the early sixth rounder. So not a huge deal. We've still landed 3 very talented players to the team. Now at this point, we'll see who's all available. Wanya Morris would definitely be a route to consider. There's someone I'm considering here. Oh man, Xavier Hutchinson even. Oh gosh. There's going to be some options. So at this point, and I don't think he should be there, but Xavier Hutchinson would just be a fantastic pick for this team. You get your Marvin Jones replacement, you get a future wide receiver, and if you have someone go down, you still feel really good about the receiving core. Because I think it's better than what you had last year even. I think Xavier Hutchinson can be that kind of player. He's a very just well-rounded prospect, turned out to be a better athlete than people thought at the combine. And to me, it's just shocking right now that people aren't talking about him as, say, a second-round selection. So he's an option. Wanya Morris, be a nice tackle to develop, but I think you go with that receiver over that. I think that's more valuable. You even got Andrew Voorhees here, could be a great value, but I would have picked Xavier Hutchinson over him before he even got injured. Morila Jamo could have been nice too, but we just also hit the defensive line. Xavier Hutchinson is going to be our pick here. So, I mean, you got to feel pretty good about landing these kinds of players. And really the only thing in this that could end up not happening is a team getting desperate for the 24. It's possible that doesn't happen. It's possible they make moves with other teams. But I have the feeling right now we're going to see something like this happen on draft day for the Jaguars where they move back. We might not even be picking in the first round when all is said and done. And ultimately, it's worth it because you're going to get a lot of capital in return. You're going to win that trade. And you're going to be able to make a move like this where you get 2 guys you really like. As long as they're falling. You know, that is an important part too. Off here, Davis Allen. I actually like him a lot as a tight end. I think he's a nice consolation prize later in the draft, but we obviously got Kincaid, so it's possible you go that route, but you don't need to. Payne Durham's also sitting there. Trey Dean, man, this guy was in the 3rd round like a few weeks ago, and then after the combine just completely tanked, which is really unfortunate because he should be going relatively early on day 3, and he's just not in that talk right now. With this board, I mean, you did lose 2 tight ends, right? You lost, oh man, what's his name? Chris Manhertz. And Dan Arnold is still a free agent, but no sign of him returning at this point. We're not going to be afraid to make a move like this. Because if you want to run a 2 tight end offense, you can use Davis Allen in that kind of scheme if you need to. So if, say, Kincaid goes down to injury or Evan Ingram does, you're still able to run it if you need to. So I'm fine with that kind of move. And at this point, let's see if someone's still on the board. McClendon Curtis, there we go. This is someone that they were interested in before really even the combine. I think they talked to him right at the beginning of it maybe, but could be a really nice interior offensive lineman. Believe he played on the right side for Chattanooga, but could be a nice selection to add a little bit of competition to your offensive line group, and add a little more depth on the interior. And you also can roll with Josh Wells as your swing tackle. You can survive with that, and you feel relatively fine with your offensive line. You know, you're going to be prone to injuries. That could definitely kill you, but you're not in a completely do or die situation there. And your starting group is really good. You feel great about that. So McClendon Curtis, we'll bring him in. And we're going to round this out with our last pick. We'll see who's on the board here. I think here, I'll probably just go with Trey Dean, because I think he should be gone a lot earlier. And there's not really anyone else who just blows my mind being on the board. Maybe Thomas and Coombe could go a little earlier too. O'Shawn Mathis, it's a guy we've taken around this point. But we'll go with Trey Dean. Wrap up this draft here. So, a lot of discussion today. I'm talking about the cap situation, talking about really just guys in the draft, what we know as far as rumors, and what the Jaguars should do. And I don't know if they're going to have a draft like this, where they're picking this many times in the second round, making all of these moves, right? Not sure if that's going to happen. But I think we see what's possible if this team can find a good suitor for the 24th selection. Because if they're smart, and we've seen them do really good on the second day of the draft. I mean they've hit home run picks. If we give Balky and Doug Peterson a lot of selections around that time, I think you're going to bring in really good players to the team. And we talk about 2021, who they brought in. Your first pick, Tyson Campbell at 33. Obviously a home run pick. You got a cornerback who's arguably top 5 in the league. He's a lockdown. He's dominant for what he does. You love what he brings to the table. You got Walker Little, I believe at 45 that year. And getting him on the team, you have your starting right tackle. You have a guy you can play the left side too. And he was a high-end swing. I mean, one of the best swing tackles in the league, if not the best, for the last year. And so you love what he can offer you as a starter. And I think this is someone who's going to stick around past the first contract with the team. Now, other guys they got. Andre Cisco, another person they brought in that has been fantastic for the secondary. Had some injury issues, but still played out of his mind. And even J2 Fele, who they let walk from the team, he was an impact player for the Bengals. Ended up getting a starting role with the team. And I think Jordan Smith is going to follow suit. I think you will see that this year. And that's part of what has me excited for him, because we've seen how good that draft class is. They didn't really miss on anything. I mean, unless you're talking about like Jalen Camp in the 6th round, which, whatever, right? Like, it's a 6th round pick. That can happen. But every other pick, I mean, even the first rounders, obviously with Lawrence and ETN, those were great picks. So we've seen what they can do on day 2. Luke Fortner even this last year, a really good center. And Chad Muma, while it wasn't necessarily the greatest positional value, he played fine this last year. Wasn't any problems with him. And so I think it's a good idea for this team to kind of pick up what's left on day 2 and not consolidate the picks at that point, but kind of add to what they have and then make a lot of moves like this. Because then you have that opportunity to bring in a ton of really good players. And you just, really what you sacrifice is your choice of the cream of the crop, right? Because if you stick at 24, you get to choose from a lot of different players. But at the same time, I think Brian Branch is going off the board there to the Jaguars, if that's the case. But after Jacksonville, might not be a ton of teams that are going to be huge on him. And if no one makes a trade up for him, then I think he could be yours at the top of the 2nd round. So ultimately, what we did with this draft class, made a lot of moves, ended up consolidating what we had. But we did trade back early, gave us a lot of extra capital, gave us a little more power in this draft. We got a really great slot corner, best one in the class. You got Dalton Kincaid at tight end, your future at that position. BJ Ojulari, best pass rusher in this class right now. I do believe that. Not that he has the highest ceiling, but as far as his repertoire, the moves that he has in his arsenal, I don't think that anyone else compares to him at this point. Xavier Hutchinson as well at receiver, fantastic 4th guy for the team. And if you have someone go down, you can pull him into the game and still function at a really high level. You do that with Davis Allen too. Really good backup for the position because you're probably going to use Kincaid all the time. You're going to use Evan Ingram all the time. Those guys are going to be on the field. You're going to have a lot of 2 tight end sets. And we've seen Doug Pearson love that. They utilized Ertz and Goddard a lot in Philly while they were together. And so I think you see that again. You get McClendon Curtis, kind of pick up one of the sneaky picks on the interior, add that to your room, you get Trey Dean. Essentially say, we're not just going to make this guy UDFA because of the combine, because he actually showed some stuff in his time at Florida and could be a decent selection. So ultimately, I think it's a pretty good draft for the team. Worked out pretty dang well. And, I mean, it all kind of comes down to whether or not you get a team that's desperate for the pick. And unfortunately, as I've said so many times on here, Steelers made a stupid pick. It shows our logo here, but this is the Steelers pick. That would not have happened in real life. We all know that. But making a move like that for Jordan Addison is very much in the cards because you don't really get that opportunity again to go pair your young quarterback with a young receiver that played with him. And we saw how electric they were together. I think that's the kind of move Pittsburgh needs to make, especially getting Paris Johnson at 17 to just have a home run of a draft. And they're willing to give up that kind of capital. So very much a win-win situation there for both teams. So with that all said, we got 2 weeks left. We'll be out at the NFL draft. I'm really excited for it. Hope to record some stuff. If you're going out to the NFL draft this year in Kansas City, let me know. Would love to meet up with some fans there, talk about Jags football. That's what we're doing here. So I'm excited, but appreciate you guys watching. Appreciate you taking your time here. I hope you have a great rest of your day. And finally, go Jags.